Poland's top court has made it more difficult for women to access legal abortion, ruling the termination of fetuses with congenital defects is unconstitutional. The predominantly Catholic country already has some of the strictest termination laws in Europe. It's only allowed in cases of rape or incest or if the mother's health is at risk. Rights groups have been fighting against further tightening of the rules. Leah Hochter is the Regional Director for Europe at the Centre for Reproductive Rights. She joins me now from Geneva to discuss the impacts of the court's decision. Thank you so much for joining us here on Euronews. First of all, can I just get your reaction to that ruling from the top court in Poland?
Thank you very much for having me this evening. This is really an unprecedented attack on women's health and well-being, on their human rights, that we are seeing occur today within Poland, an unprecedented event within the EU. In fact, Poland is now the only European Union member state to actually remove a ground for legal abortion from its law within the EU in recent decades. It means essentially that women's health and lives are now at risk. As your opening mentioned, Poland's abortion law is one of the most restrictive within Europe, within the EU. It's one of only 2 countries not to have broadly legalised abortion. And as a result of today's ruling, women's access to care will now be jeopardised and their health and well-being gravely harmed.
Just interesting what you're saying there about women's access to care, because before Northern Ireland legalised abortions, we saw women having to travel to the UK or other parts of Europe in order to get their terminations. Is the fear that by bringing back this law, this ruling, is going to force Polish women to have to go to a different country? And how dangerous is that for the mother?
Well, the fact of the matter is that laws that prohibit abortion do nothing except to harm women's health and well-being by pushing it underground, or, as you said, by forcing women to travel to foreign jurisdictions, to other countries, to access care. And that is what, because of the difficulties that women in Poland have already faced under the already highly restrictive law, that is what many women in Poland are already having to do: travel to other European countries to access care, as women in Northern Ireland had to do, or women in Ireland had to do prior to the reforms in those jurisdictions in the last number of years. And as a result of today's ruling, it will now mean that more women in Poland who are facing very difficult situations in their pregnancies will now be faced with a journey overseas to access abortion care if they decide to end their pregnancies. And what we know is that this treatment places women who've decided to end pregnancies in very difficult situations, harms their health. And in fact, there have been rulings from the United Nations human rights mechanisms that this amounts to a form of inhuman and degrading treatment. It places these women who are already in very vulnerable situations in even more difficult circumstances.
Sorry to have interrupted you there. It's not just Poland, though, is it? On Tuesday, Slovakia had a similar bill, but that was struck down. It didn't manage to pass. Why are we seeing these European countries trying to pass these bills? Is it religion? Is it conservatism? A mixture of the two? What do you think is the driving force here?
I mean, what we saw in Slovakia this week was positive, in that the lawmakers in Slovakia rejected an attempt, as you said, to introduce new restrictions to Slovakia's abortion law. And so that was a very positive result, and we applaud Slovak lawmakers for that. What I think we are seeing in both Poland and Slovakia is, in fact, an attempt by a small sector of society, a small group of stakeholders in both countries, to play politics with women's health and lives. In fact, these moves, the attempt in Slovakia to restrict the law through legislative means, and the attempt today, which was successful by Polish lawmakers, to use judicial means to restrict the law, these do not represent the majority opinions of the public in both countries, neither of whom favour an introduction of new restrictions on access to abortion or changes in this way to both countries' abortion laws. So it really does represent the actions of a very small sector of society in both countries who are, as I said, playing politics with women's health care.
Yeah, Hochter joining us there from Geneva. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, a year after resigning amid